Hi there, and welcome to the June 2025 tarot reading for our world. Things appear to be heating up out there, and it was difficult to decide what to ask the cards because everything seemed so important. So once again, I have been wrestling with the questions involving our leaders and the international relationships that are shifting and changing daily. Are they leading us in a direction that makes sense? Is it a direction we like? I don't know. It looks to me like situations could be settled with a bit of honest communication, a little patience, some understanding, and some humility. And I got that last one from the cards. So everything keeps moving slowly in a more difficult direction. So let's see what the cards have to say. The questions asked were, number one, when Putin and Trump are done throwing threats at one another, what will we have as an outcome for the U.S. and the Western countries? Question number two, if China becomes the number one economy in the world, which it might already be, what would be the role and position of the U.S.? Number three, what is the financial future of the U.S. and the West? It's kind of a check in there on what's happening with the money. And number four, with all the geopolitical tensions developing between East and West, between the U.S. and Europe, the U.S. and Russia, the U.S. and Israel, or Iran, or India, Pakistan, Canada, or anyone else we are dealing with on the world stage, what advice does the animal kingdom have for reducing tensions in the U.S. and the West? And the cards drawn in answer to the first question was the Knight of Swords. In response to the second question, it was the Empress. Pretty powerful. And then in response to the third question about the finances, I got the Judgment card. There's a lot in this card. And then finally, advice from the animal kingdom for reducing geopolitical tensions. And I got the porcupine. So let's look at these a little bit more deeply. Question number one, when Trump and Putin are done throwing threats at one another, what will we have as an outcome for the U.S. and the Western countries? The card drawn here was the Knight of Swords. And that's a card that could mean that war is coming unless immediate steps are taken to change the intellectual battle taking place on the world stage, where people often spout passionate words that they shouldn't, and then feel obligated to act on those words even when they don't want to act. So this is the card of intellectual clashes happening at lightning speed and with great intensity. And they're ignored until too late. The Knight of Swords asks us to look at what's happening behind the scenes, behind the curtain. And if we hope to change the course of events, we have to take some kind of action or stand up. If you look at this card, you see a knight in full battle armor on a gray horse. A knight almost always symbolizes the ideal world, a place of honor, integrity, and truth. However, on this card, the knight's position and posture indicate a fiery and aggressive willingness to fight. The armor backs this up and represents a readiness to engage, even at the risk of behaving in radical ways. The faceplate on the armor is up in a revealing position, and this represents that we should be able to see clearly where things are headed as well as the face of aggression. The face of aggression is something that people don't want to look at or admit until it's too late. Anyway, it's the face of aggression, which serves as a warning to those observing the unfolding events. The horse is gray, which calls for a more neutral stance, and this is backed up by the butterflies and red birds that decorate its bridle. The butterflies represent transformation that calls for an effort to transform the situation before it becomes an actual war. If this doesn't happen, the butterflies warn that those who engage in the fight will be forced to deal with the transformation of both sides, a transformation that can be very messy and have unpredictable results. So why not fix things early on before they get to be a mess? The red birds back up that warning against passions that take flight but get out of control. The red birds also represent zeal and sometimes an anger that runs so deep that it blinds one or both sides and results in tragedy. There are trees in the background that are bent in the wind, and trees symbolize families and society. The fact that they are bent in the wind shows that there could be big disruptions for families and the communities they form. Of course, anytime you have fighting, there's big disruption. The trees reveal that the knight and horse are charging forward against the prevailing wind, which indicates that there's really not a lot of support for fighting or going to war. When you look at the card, you'll also see that the horse and rider are moving from the right to the left, and moving to the left symbolizes a move into subconscious drives and hidden forces that are behind the whole aggression. Since our question is about what we will experience as a result of the war of words between Trump and Putin, the subconscious drives pushing Putin might be that he and Russia are tired of being the world's whipping boy, the people who are blamed for everything and misrepresented again and again. The subconscious drive pushing Trump may be the insistence on winning, maybe because he doesn't know how to lose gracefully. And there are likely hidden forces pulling some of Trump's strings from behind the curtains, since the deep state has not been entirely defeated yet. The knight wears a dark red scarf that flows out behind him, and he holds a sword in his right hand that's raised so high that the point of the sword cannot be seen because it's outside the frame of the card. That dark red scarf carries the warning to avoid being carried away by out of control emotions. The scarf also represents a fluid and changing story or narrative blowing in the wind that is difficult to grasp or support. This points to the sources of news available being unable or unwilling to print or talk about anything happening in the real world, making it difficult for people to correctly assess the situation. The sword extending outside the frame of the card indicates an inability of those involved to grasp what could be set in motion if they're not careful. And it represents being unable to see the real outcome. Between the trees bending in the wind and the point of the sword being outside the frame of the card, the message is that those observing the situation, that's us, the families of society, may not be in support of any fight because they can't see any point or any benefits it would bring them. What's the point of fighting? Just settle it. There are 5 birds circling high in the sky. You can hardly see them up there in the right-hand corner. And the sky has ragged gray clouds in it. The distant landscape is barren. The 5 birds symbolize a coming storm, and the ragged gray clouds symbolize cloudy thinking and a lack of clarity. The barren landscape warns against becoming alienated from the earth and the common sense of nature. However, it also offers an invitation to plow new ground in an effort to resolve a situation. Kind of a get out of the box thing. The Knight of Swords is a card that represents sovereignty and lessons in dealing with mastery. It advises us to stop hiding behind conventional do's and don'ts and traditions and things we used to do and ways we used to settle, and to realize our potential. It urges us to get out of the box, affirm a position of love, humor, and openness to new ideas, instead of falling for the same old solutions of competition and war. It poses the question, do your values need to be examined and cleaned up? And it tells us that we must give ourselves permission to consolidate love, intention, and determination, and then act in radically fresh and illuminated ways. This card is known as the Lord of the Air, possibly pointing to military consequences coming from hot air and arguments being tossed around, as well as hinting at air wars or reliance on air supremacy. It is related to the 8 of Swords, depicting a woman. Maybe you'll remember, she stands blindfolded in a circle of swords. And it's also related to the 9 of Swords, representing nightmares, sudden awakenings, and dark night of the soul periods of time. Keywords for the Knight of Swords are verbal, military, strategic, impractical, impetuous, skill, bravery, defense, wrath, extravagance, war, destruction, opposition, resistance, and ruin. So question number 2 was, if China becomes the #1 economy in the world, what would be the role and position of the US? And the card drawn here was the Empress, number 3 in the major arcana. This is a very interesting response to this question. It indicates a major challenge to the US, especially the men of the US. It represents a change in the way Americans behave on the world stage, and a big change in how we're seen by others around the world. It presents a serious call for America to develop a new story, a new vision of ourselves, and to lead with love. There's a lot of emphasis on love in the cards this month. So this is not something, leading with love is not something that our government, or especially the Pentagon, are very good at. The Empress card acknowledges the royalty, the majesty, and the sovereignty that America has enjoyed in the past. It recognizes the confident, self-assured manner with which she went about helping other countries and supporting people in developing nations. However, in addition to all of those good qualities, this is the card of someone who has been overgiving, and has ignored or abandoned their own well-being. It carries the message that there has been a failure to stay connected to nature and the earth, thus undermining our own survival. When you look closely at the Empress card, you see a woman sitting in a relaxed but alert, upright pose on a comfortable cushioned throne. This symbolizes being in a really comfortable position at the moment and feeling cushioned against troubles or strife. The Empress herself represents the great goddess of antiquity. The great goddess was Mother Nature, who mothers us, feeds us, nurtures, and teaches us. It's Mother Nature who teaches what is really important and that it does not pay to make assumptions about one's position in life or get too far out of balance, lest we tip over and fall due to forces and cycles we did not anticipate. The Empress is wearing a long flowered robe, symbolizing that our culture and perhaps our entire nation has flowered and reached its peak. That same flowered flowing robe is often seen as something worn by women during pregnancy. And this card points to a coming birth or rebirth, something that's always messy and a lot of work, but also very rewarding. Leaning up against the side of her throne is a large gray heart made of stone. On the stone is carved a symbol of Venus, a planet that is closely aligned with the Empress. Venus represents the feminine side of life with its very distinct way of relating to others, very different from the male way. The size of that big gray stone heart symbolizes the great love that the U.S. is capable of, and the fact that it's made of stone represents the need to harden oneself enough to make the really tough decisions. Anyone who's been a mother or a father, for that matter, knows how tough those decisions can be. But the message of that large stone heart is twofold. First, it demands a lot of love, trust, toughness, and a willingness to lend a hand and take responsibility for shaping the future of ourselves and those we love. Second, it demands that same love, truth, toughness, and willingness to take responsibility. But now it must be focused on admitting the ways we have let ourselves down. Since our question is about the role and position of the U.S. if China becomes the #1 economy, the Empress indicates that we would be faced with the truth of our overgiving, our reasons for overgiving, and the need to restore love for ourselves while returning to balance and well-being. In other words, the Empress will push us toward greater wisdom and honesty. Were we just giving to get? Were we pretending to give, but were really bribing? Were we handing out money or information or military goods in order to entrap and make others feel obliged to cooperate with us? Tough questions. The Empress sits in the midst of Mother Nature's abundance. Trees fill the background, representing many families who are nurtured and supported by the decisions of the Empress. The field of golden grain in the foreground symbolizes fruitfulness, nutrition, and the ability to feed ourselves and others. The river moving through the trees to the waterfall represents the continuity of life and our connection to Source. It reminds us that we are bonded to all of nature in its thousands of expressions, and to separate ourselves is to cut ourselves off from what makes life possible in the first place? Source. The Empress wears a crown of 12 stars and holds a scepter of Venus in her right hand, a symbol of great love and the oneness of body, mind, emotions, and spirit that must be cultivated in any individual or group. Note, it says must be cultivated. That means it's not automatic. We have to work at that. We have to want it. We have to intend it. So the 12 stars carry the message that we are descended from the stars and we must reconnect to them, bringing their wisdom, skills, and relationships into fruition on the earth. This hints at the need to grow into mature beings who base their relationships on the power of love, which is, love is the power to see, hear, and act with an honest response. The scepter then promises an inheritance of clarity, naturalness, and deep satisfaction, something that we may have forgotten or stopped believing we can have. Since our question is about the role of the U.S. if China becomes number one in the world, the Empress points to a situation in which we have intense lessons about love and about taking care of ourselves in ways that are honest and that keep our economy balanced. It hints at having to play a different role on the world stage, one that demonstrates not only how to renew and rebuild, but how to become a whole new being. This would require a makeover of the human and his consciousness. But the Empress is part symbol and part promise that if we can do this, we will bloom into beautiful beings. So keywords for the Empress are awakening to higher consciousness, balance, action, uncertainty, initiative, the unknown, unraveling of material matters and affairs, fruitfulness, love of luxury, regrets, facing truth, abundance, light, rebirth, authority, and hidden motives. So that's it for the Empress card. Question number 3. What is the financial future of the U.S. and the West? I thought it was time to check in again. So much is happening so fast in that world. And I certainly didn't expect the Judgment card, but that is what came up in response to the question about our financial future. Wow. The message of this card is pretty blunt. Wake up and mobilize all of your energies. And that means properly burying what is dead. Oh my. So much meaning in just one message. This card demands that we draw the line or take the consequences and depart. What line might it be referring to? And what consequences would there be for failing to draw that line? Might that line be the line between an old, familiar financial system that is now dead and a new system or new systems, plural, that are more complex, require new technology, and demand a whole new approach to money and finance, requiring that everybody learn something new? Could it be a line between wild, irresponsible spending and keeping a balanced budget by limiting our spending to what we can afford without borrowing? In spite of the blunt, almost harsh message of the Judgment card, this card also encourages opening to the dawn of something new, something that is yet to come or is being born. But before anything new can be born, It warns of a serious change of conditions and position in the world, often through total loss and sometimes complex lawsuits. Total loss and complex lawsuits. So it encourages handling this loss by using the gift of perception. It tells us that the perception must be based on realistic assessments of our situation, and those assessments must acknowledge what is workable and what is no longer workable. Since government, business, and our personal lives are intimately tied to finance, this hints at massive changes across an entire network of entangled systems and ways of doing things. Big disruption. The card depicts a large angel with red wings and fire in its hair, blowing a trumpet from a bank of dark gray clouds in a light blue sky. Attached to the trumpet is a white flag with an orange-red cross on it. Below the angel are a half dozen naked gray people, men, women, and children, standing in caskets with their arms stretching upwards as if beseeching someone for help, or maybe suddenly raised from the dead. The caskets are floating on the water. A distant shore can be seen just barely, but it's there. And beyond that is a solid bank of snow-covered mountains. The angel represents the great power of something that is going to awaken everyone, even those who are dead to what's happening around them and who pay no attention to the external world because they're caught in meaningless or irrelevant pursuits. The trumpet is the tool that blasts everyone awake. And since our question is about our financial future, it would likely be some kind of announcement about our money system. Trumpets also symbolize a great deal of auditory news. And this suggests that we be prepared for an onslaught of information or a need to gather new information to help our situation. The fire in the angel's hair indicates a change of mind and heart that is fast and may not give people much time to think or plan. The red wings represent a purging of the old. And since the wings extend beyond the frame of the card, they tell us that the outcome cannot be seen or anticipated. This means that the outcome must be created by us. And we must know what we want before we start creating or insisting on anything regarding finances. The flag with the orange-red cross symbolizes coming to a crossroads in personal, family, and business matters. And that crossroads will require taking leave of some situation and crossing into a new, healthier, more conciliatory way of behaving and dealing with a situation, which in this case is money. This hints that we have not been acting in ways that we can be proud of. Have we been arrogant, demanding, unreasonable in our financial dealings among ourselves and with others across the planet? The naked gray people standing in caskets symbolize the sudden awakening to something that demands new assessments, new decisions, new information, and a new life or a new way of life. The fact that they are naked means they have nowhere to hide and no defense against what's happening. The gray color urges some detachment, which may mean detaching from the old habits and ways of living. And this might have something to do with drawing the line mentioned above. The intensity of the awakening will demand immediate attention to money and finance. And the message here is that those who do not want to adjust to the new situation may as well return to the dead. The water on which the caskets float symbolizes great emotions and wide swings in mood. Ooh, it points to a period of great instability. However, the distant shore tells people that there is a direction to go in that at least offers some firm ground to stand on. The solid row of snow-covered mountains symbolizes a large number of problems that will have to be solved. But the light blue of the sky and the light blue in the mountains themselves will bring clarity. Light blue is the symbol of clarity, and that white snow will bring a massive amount of cleaning up around finances. All of the symbolism mentioned above deals with individual stresses and responses to a situation, but the Judgment card has another level of meaning that has to do with being publicly judged by others. Since our question is about our financial future, it's likely that we will have to face the judgments and the, what might be called the sentencing by those others in other places in the world. The Judgment card brings an ability to see the bigger picture. And the warning here is that greed, blaming others, and blaming oneself are problems that will have to be worked on again and again until the dungeons of the past have been cleared and the citadel of the future has a firm foundation. Only then will rebirth bring a new and better quality of life instead of another round of weary repetition. The Judgment card urges all to recognize that perceptions and decisions made in the past may not have been the best, but everyone is free to make new and better decisions that move us down a new path. This is another hint that we're going to have to draw the line as we move down that path. A powerful message of the card is learn to forgive without forgetting and without hanging on to resentment or a grudge. Can I repeat that? Learn to forgive without forgetting or without resentment and without hanging on to resentment or a grudge. Otherwise, you're just going to repeat the same thing again and again. The Judgment card is governed by Pluto, which rules purification, the bowels, elimination, and transformation. So these activities purge our lives of situations and relationships that no longer serve a useful purpose. Let it happen. Keywords for judgment are before and after. That's that line, draw a line. Before and after. Lawsuits, decisions, sentencing, renewal, transformation, awakening, dawn, weakness, deliberation, purification, removing domination, death, and rising from the ashes. Wow. Judgment card is pretty rich with meaning. And then our last question, question number 4. With all of the geopolitical tensions developing between East and West, between Europe and the US, between the US and Russia, between the US and Israel, Iran, India, Pakistan, Canada, or anyone else we're dealing with, what advice does the animal kingdom have for reducing tensions in the United States and the West. And the card drawn here made me just laugh out loud. It was the porcupine, number 12 in the animal medicine deck. The porcupine is the card of innocence, humility, faith, and trust. This card calls for a return to the innocence, humility, and childlike wonder that has been long lost along life's path. It's a tough challenge for the United States. We have long been known as the bully. And if we were to change our approach to others, a great many people would see it as a loss of power on the world stage. However, that does not need to be the case. We have choices. We can choose between bully power, hard power, and soft power. And perhaps the lesson for us would be learning how to use soft power. Maybe something with a firm, occasionally fierce, feminine touch, like a mother defending her young, or a quiet power that's neither afraid nor fooled by bullies, because we have been there and we understand bully power from the inside out, especially the way things end when a bigger bully comes along. When looking at a porcupine, one is immediately aware of the 30,000 quills that cover the animal, except for its face. These quills will lie flat when the porcupine is calm and feeling secure, but they stand straight up when it is disturbed or threatened. The quills are a huge deterrent to predators, but the side effect of this is being avoided and left in isolation. The task for those who draw the porcupine card is to restore faith and trust, first in ourselves, and then in our relationships with other countries. And that's true for all of the countries of the West. Restore faith and trust first. This restoration of faith brings the ability to move mountains if clarity and purpose can be reignited at the same time. You know what you want? You go for it. Clarity and purpose depend on restoring trust. Trust that the Great Spirit has a divine plan guiding us. Once trust has been restored, the next task is to find a path forward, one that's most beneficial for everyone, including those inside the U.S. and those outside that we are working with. The advice from Porcupine is that we will know we have found the right path when we are using all of our talents to help unfold that divine plan. The big question is, what is the divine plan? What talents as a nation do we have that we could identify and utilize? Can we envision ourselves in a whole new role that would be helpful to others and make the world a better place for all? America was the first country to decide it was going to govern itself without kings and queens. This is a good example of people who are advancing their consciousness in a step-by-step, steady way that leads to personal power and greater development of the human being. Saying, I'll govern myself, thank you. Do we have a talent for demonstrating advanced consciousness? Or advancing consciousness even? What about a talent for exploring new approaches to life? I would think we have that in spades. We don't have a lot of bindings to a lot of traditions. One example of exploring new approaches to life was religious freedom. That was once a radical idea, a radical approach to living. Since our question is about the geopolitical tensions in our relationships with other countries and among those other countries themselves as well, Porcupine warns that we have destroyed the faith and trust that others once had in us. And this will contribute to our isolation until we can rebuild that trust. This means having to ask ourselves, well, who are we? And how do we begin to know ourselves differently? Who are the people of other countries? What makes them tick? What are their dreams and goals? How might we interact in ways that carry us toward a world that has dropped the jaded cynicism we have all fallen into? What will help us recapture a bit of the humility, playfulness, and faith in the goodness of others? The porcupine carries the warning to avoid getting caught in the chaos of a rigid adult world where fear, greed, and suffering are commonplace. Porcupine medicine is a dose of laughter that reduces the overly serious approach to life. I think we need that. That treats everything as a severe problem or even a catastrophe. It urges us to open our hearts and our imaginations to what could be. Think about that. Porcupine reminds us that as young things, we used to have great fun playing with bits and pieces and scraps of this or that, using our imagination to transform what was at hand into whatever we needed. The quills on the porcupine go up whenever fear, hurt, or predators are around. And the message is that we must protect ourselves, but quills up is no way to live. An important part of Porcupine's message is it's time to begin again. This means starting over, having faith that we will be able to learn and integrate whatever lessons we have had. It means trusting that the same creativity and excitement that started our country will be able to build it anew. The porcupine is only vulnerable when it is belly up and on its back. And the message here is the need to get into an upright position, keep our quills down, and learn to work with others in order to restore trust. So that's it for this month. Wow. So let's sum up what we've said. Question number 1 was, when Putin and Trump are done throwing threats at one another, what will we have as an outcome for the U.S. and the Western countries? And the card drawn here was the Knight of Swords, which symbolizes that war is coming unless immediate steps are taken to change the intellectual battle taking place on the world stage. This is the card of intellectual clashes happening at lightning speed and with great intensity. Clashes that are ignored until it's too late. The knight rides his horse into the wind, a symbol that there's not a lot of support for fighting or war. And he holds his sword high. The tip of his sword is outside the frame of the card, symbolizing an unseen outcome. But those rushing toward war are not paying attention to outcomes because they are being carried away by out-of-control emotions. The red scarf represents a narrative that is blowing in the winds of political control. The Knight of Swords is a card of sovereignty that calls us to get out of our ruts. Realize our role is to give ourselves permission to act in radically fresh and illuminated ways. I like that. Question number 2, if China becomes the number 1 economy in the world, what would be the role and position of the U.S.? And the card here was the very powerful and promising Empress, a card of challenge and change that calls for a new story in America. It calls for a new vision of ourselves that takes into account the destruction of our image on the world stage. The Empress acknowledges the royalty, majesty, and sovereignty that America has enjoyed, and she recognizes how much we have done to help others. But this card is the card of overgiving for the wrong reasons. And it calls for a stop to this and a time out. Time out while we focus on restoring our own well-being. The Empress is the harbinger of a future pregnant with possibility, and she demands that the tough decisions be faced and handled well. Her most important directives are to love, to forgive ourselves for mistakes and poor decisions or lack of action or whatever, and to reconnect to Mother Nature and Source. She warns that a period of isolation is needed while we heal, and that this healing must be deep and complete if we want to build something new that is successful, peaceful, and beautiful. Question number 3 was, what is the financial future of the U.S. and the West? And this brought the Judgment card, a card with blunt, almost harsh messages. It offers little assurance that our financial future will be something good, and it tells us we will have to wake up and mobilize all of our energies as we deal with our financial future. This is a card of stark change, of drawing the line between before and after. And it warns of total loss made worse by big lawsuits. The Judgment card symbolizes a sudden, shocking awakening to the financial situation and a need to use the gift of perception to assess what still works and what is no longer workable at all. It advises us to properly bury what is dead. Wow. And move forward into a new life or way of life in spite of the possibility of being severely judged by other countries. We are encouraged to learn to forgive without forgetting and without hanging on to resentment or grudges, as the situations and relationships that no longer serve a useful purpose are purged from our lives. And the last question, number 4, with all the geopolitical tensions developing between East and West, between Europe and the US, between the US and Russia, the US and Israel, Iran, India, Pakistan, Canada, or anyone else we're dealing with, what advice does the animal kingdom have for reducing tensions in the United States and the West? And the animal giving us advice regarding geopolitical tensions is the porcupine, whose motto is, first, restore innocence, humility, faith, and trust. To restore innocence, we must have humility and its gift of listening. Be humble enough to listen. To restore humility, we must have faith that others will listen and respond. To restore faith, we must remake ourselves and build the bridges that allow others to trust us once again. Porcupine urges us to open our hearts and our imagination to what could be. He brings the message that it's time to begin again. This means starting over and integrating everything we have learned. He reminds us to get off our backs and stand in an upright position again. Keep our quills down and learn to work with others in order to renew and restore ourselves. Work with others in order to renew and restore ourselves. So when you look at the total message that the cards have presented us with, we're warned that if our leaders continue on their present course, we may end up in a war we don't want. The cards tell us that if China becomes number one, we need to change our behavior to incorporate love, innocence, and playfulness. If we don't make these changes on our own, and maybe even if we do, we may get a kick in the rear from a changing financial system that forces us to draw a line in the sand and start over with a whole new life. So it promises to be a very interesting month. Think about it. What would be your first step in starting over? Make a great month. And thank you for listening.